Hey everybody, we're working on the Cadillac trunk lid again. So we'd rebuilt all that bottom all the way across, right up into these corners. And there now you see new metal. So here's what we got going on. We basically re-skinned the bottom edge. Gonna have to come in here with a grinder and carve that out a little bit bigger than that hole so that we have room to weld around it. Probably gonna put a little piece in here and in here, weld that in. We might just build that with weld. We'll see how it goes when we hit it. It's pretty thick, it's easy to weld, it doesn't seem to move or warp. So what we're doing on the outside is pretty obvious. But these cars, this is what we've cut off. So the bottom edge wasn't rotten. But you can see all these holes up here. So where it was pinched was down here. And you can see where, actually it was, let me grab something I can point with. It was pinched way up to about here. That's just some primer from me messing around with the backside. But everything above that, this is where all the junk sat in here. And it just ate through. But by the time you get up to here, got super thick metal again. I mean, here you can still see that finish. And it looks like there was some kind of finish, but it wasn't painted. I don't know if it was some kind of a dipped galvanizing or whatever. But the metals are really good from here up. But you can see, you can almost see that line. And that's what rots out on these. But the inner was way more rotten than the outside. Now, some guys back in the day would have just kind of smashed that in with a hammer because the bottom lip was okay and just fiberglassed it or whatever. The problem is you don't know how far you got to cut out. Now, luckily for us, we replaced so much of the inner structure that we were able to see the backside, so we knew we'd be good. And the reason we cut it where we did, all the metal was really good. You can see here, there's a line here, a body line. So by welding just below the body line, we were able to keep that shape. So once I grind this weld down, we might run another bead of weld up here, or maybe a bit of fiberglass. It's actually pretty tight. Now, I didn't do a cut and butt here. I did a lap weld, but the lap is really, really minimal. I don't know if I can show that. Here, actually, it was a butt weld by the time we got to here because I shaved some of this out. So that's all got to be ground smooth. And you can see, here's a piece of old metal, which was fine. Down here, there was none. And then you can see the structure we put in. That's all metal we put in behind it, but you can see our welds, and that's pretty good. You can see another piece in there. Now, to finish this off, we're going to spray that full of Cosmoline inside. I was just watching a video on Lakeside Auto Body, and check him out. He shows a lot of cool tricks. And he's been using something called Cosmoline. And I'll have to put it in the description what the part number is or something because he shared that on his video. You can use that or possibly a wool wax product or something like that and basically blast it all inside. So once the car's all done, that's how we're going to coat all that. There's places where there's primer and then you weld and it just ate it off. Of course, there was a little bit where this fold was. Had a bit of surface, so we ground that off now. So I will hit that with a little bit of the weld-through primer, but the reality is I have a feeling that, yeah, see, I primed in there, but I didn't get this edge. So we will be doing the, like I say, the wool wax on there. But this piece, as you can see, is kind of stupid. So we'll try to cut one a little bigger. We'll bend all the weird shapes in it just sort of by hand. Then we'll sink it down in there and weld it in because there was a spot up here and right down the edge we didn't know. And as you can see, there's the edge up there. It wasn't real great. Plenty thick. But there's a pinhole here. And there's a deep pinhole there. Whatever caused that, we didn't want this in here. So you might as well, if you got a pinhole up here, if you're going to cut it out, cut it all the way down. Now I have a line here where I considered cutting right up into the corner. But basically, based off the thickness of the metal, I'm not going to worry about that up there. I believe that'll be fine. Now, as far as bare metal inside goes, oh, let me kill that. Always when you're making a video, one of the compressors will come on. Yeah, as far as bare metal goes, even if you can't get enough wax or oil or something in there to solve it, keep in mind, this is a 1963, and as old as this car was, it was all bare metal inside, and it's only rusted out now. Granted, had it seen winter and whatnot, it would have rotted out a long time ago. This car is never going to see winter again. So here, I basically made these too long, drew a line, and I had kept... I threw it on the floor somewhere, but way over there you see a piece. That's the piece here. So what I did is I left half an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch here. So when I put this in place, I was able to match the bottom and top exactly the same. And then I went ahead and welded here and then cut that little piece off. So here's a butt weld. And the reason we do that, we want to get this edge to match up nice when we get our other pieces up in here. We'll have to do some work to finish it. You can see in here, we've got plenty of penetration. Everything's welded solid. Here there's a fold over, it's welded down lower. But again, anything like that, you can see new metal going all the way up into there. So that'll all be full of Cosmo or wool wax. But yeah, I'm going to order some of that Cosmo. It's called Cosmoline. For people who don't know what it is, a lot of weapons used in World War II and through the 50s and 60s, Cosmoline was something that they put on a lot of rifles. And I know that from a past job that I used to have years ago. And a lot of the old military service rifles all over Europe had something called Cosmoline on them. And the cool thing is they were doing this in the 40s and 50s, putting them in crates, and they were left in mountains and bunkers and what have you. And then we started importing a lot of that stuff into Canada just as, you know, hunting rifles and that sort of thing, right through, say, the 2000s. A lot of them, say, from 2010 to about 5 years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago. But anyway, you'd take them out of a crate. They hadn't been in there because you'd get a crate with 8 or 10 at a time, depending on what it was. So guys would import those over here. They'd go to the shops. They'd open the crates, clean all the Cosmoline off, and whether they were new or refurbed guns back in the 50s, a lot of them, and 40s, you know, a lot of them were in mint condition. So the Cosmoline stuff feels like a greasy, waxy stuff in your fingers, and I can tell you, if you've ever bought an SKS rifle in particular, if you were lucky and got one in the 90s or 2000s, you know what I'm talking about. It's like a greasy, nasty, waxy stuff. But everything underneath is good. So we're going to try some of that in here. But what we did here, basically, again, this is welded over top. There's a body line there, so any differences will be so minimal it won't matter. But by keeping that little line there and not going above, it allowed us to control the heat, right? So this isn't like warped at all. And anything in this panel, I mean, we're still going to have to mud this a little bit, but it'll be very minimal. You can see here where I had to go in and weld that a little hotter, and it actually took the paint off. But if you look here, it didn't even take the paint off. So watch that little heat rainbow that you get underneath the welds. We didn't have hardly any, but here we had a big one, and here we had a big one. So I kind of changed what I was doing, and you can see the rest of it. You know, so that'll be pretty good once we shave that all off, and then any spots we see, we might go over it with the welder again. We'll cut around here and around here. We'll weld that in because this is all set to work with the piece inside, and there's a clip that goes here. So we're going to fill that probably just with weld. I'll just take my time, a few beads here and there until we fill it. Then we'll grind it smooth. And up here, actually there's very little up there. We'll do the same thing. So the lock will be sunk in there. It'll be pretty close to what it used to be. Now on the other side, we went up here. This side, it was good at the pinch, but from here over it was, well, you can see it's all pitted and rotten. So we cut that out. I believe that one was this way. Yeah, that's pretty weird. So I could have swore there was a hole in this down here, one here and one here, but now I can't. Oh, this actually was over here. So we had left a chunk in that we cut out. But there was basically a hole here and a hole here. And again, this piece right here, and you can't really tell because it doesn't seem pitted a whole lot, but I can feel a pitted line right across here with my finger, which I don't know if you can see it. But it's like a ditch. So instead of a whole bunch of round, deep crevices, craters, or pits, wow, look at that. You can actually see that line. It's like one continuous ditch. So even though this one only had that bubble and a couple at the end, you got to change this because that's going to come through. And we don't want that happening. So basically that should give us our best chance at getting all the rust out of the deck lid. And I mean, you can't get it all, but I think we got enough that this car will likely outlast the owner that owns the car. So that's what we're kind of going for. And again, here it's butted in. We had it welded to a little piece, and before we cut that off, we folded it round. Here I cut it a little funny, so I'm going to have to go in there after and fill that with a bunch of weld and then grind it off. But I like to do that to the corners anyway, make them real solid. But yeah, so I'm probably done for today. But I'll make those 2 little plates and weld them in. And the nice thing about this is now the whole bottom edge is brand new. Fits nice and tight. We basically cut these to what you see plus 1/2 inch, bent it, put it right down on the concrete. My floor is extremely flat, but I mean, you can put it on a beam, steel beam or something like that as well. And what we did is I actually took one strip and set it like so, bent that around over it, and then hammered it down. And then when you pull this out, it leaves a little gap. And then we took a chisel and just gently opened that gap. It basically slid on, and I'll tell you what, it's super tight. Here, focus. There you go. You can see how tight that is, so we're not going to have to crush that a whole lot. Now, I will go around that after, and about every 2 inches, I'm going to drill a hole about every 2 inches and plug weld the backside, so it'll kind of look a little bit like spot welds. Now, on this car, you couldn't see any of that anyway because we had the car itself had a bead of seam sealer that was pretty fat on there. But I mean, we're going to replicate that too. So when you open the trunk, the seam sealer we got on looks like all the way around the trunk lid. And in fact, I think I took a lot of that out of the other side of the trunk lid. So we'll have to seam seal pretty much, well, the front, no, all of it. We're going to have to redo all of it. I think I took it pretty much all out. Anyway. So if you got a trunk lid that you can't get, and this is the thing, right? We have our Camaro over here. And I know I talked about it before, but it is what it is. If you haven't seen the channel before, all the steel on this car is new, including the deck lid. All the steel for this car is not only available, it's fairly inexpensive. But when you're working on something like a 63 Cadillac, nothing is available. So this trunk lid had to be fixed. And we've got a parts car for this. And that trunk lid, although the bottom was a little bit better, this outer edge, because it was an Ontario car, it got full of condensation, salt, and what have you. And it was just all rotten. So we went ahead and fixed what we got. And you just got to think it through. And if you want to see how I did all the inner structure, because this is actually easy. In fact, the most challenging thing here is I welded about every 1.5 inches. And then I went from one side all the way to this side. And then I took a wire wheel on a drill like this. And we basically just went across it to clean it up. And then I went in the middle of those and I basically started at that end and just went all the way across. And then by the time you clean it and start over there, it's had time to cool. And there's no warpage in that. It is smooth, smooth, smooth. There's a couple little out dents from when I bent this and I had the metal inside, but it's not enough to matter. I might have to dolly that one a wee little bit. This one is absolutely perfect. But it doesn't matter if it is or it isn't, because any highs or lows we can knock in. We're going to put a skim coat probably all the way up to here, a filler, and then we're going to block that as smooth as can be. And when I bent this over, I went a little too hard. We ran out of material. I basically built that up with weld. You can see how we just ground it off to match. Where the other side, we didn't do anything. That's perfect. Just left a little more meat on and then kind of hammered it in a little harder. Where with this one, you know, it just bent the way it bent. Sometimes stuff fights you. You just got to think it through and go with it. We might grind the corner off a little rounder to match the other one, but otherwise, that's it. Thanks for watching. Cheers.